Hello, good night. Welcome to Week AVEIRO Art House.
Okay.
Good night, welcome to Week AVEIRO Art House. I have a pleasure to open the second roundtable within the project Breaking Case of Emergency. It's a capacity building program for independent managers and independent labor records, independent musicians. And we are again in auditorium, underground auditorium of Week AVEIRO Art House that had a role of clandestine cinema back then in time of dictatorship in Portugal, and tonight we are freely and openly speak and debate about how to release and distribute independently. We have here guests even like from several countries, online and in present, from Ninja Tunes, UK, from K7, Germany, from Bandcamp, Chicago, and Inês from Portugal, Violet representing Naive. And our moderator today is José Moura from FLUR, so I will give him a word and we can start this second round table. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, hello to everyone in here and out there. Thanks for being here. Please put up with me. Some of the questions may be silly, I don't know. We'll keep it as free and improvised as possible. And the subject, for those of you who are not aware, for tonight is to follow the process of releasing music independently from source to an audience or the public, from planning to the stores, let's say, concerning a physical product, for example. I would ask you first to make a brief introduction about yourselves, if you don't mind. And for practical reasons, I will start from the right with Matt. And please keep it as concise and as informative as you can about your own work and experience. And why were you invited? I mean, in what capacity? So Matt, please.
Okay. Hello everyone. Is this on?
Okay.
Can I have the speaker? I don't hear it.
It's important for the streaming, not for us.
Fine. No, it's okay. I don't need it. As long as you're receiving me loud and clear. Hello everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here actually. What a wonderful invitation to be at this this amazing venue. I am a co-founder of Ninja Tune Records from the UK, also half of Cold Cut. Me and Jonathan Moore, my partner, we've been doing electronic music for 36 years and seem to have managed to keep going all that time since we released our first record in 1987, which we made on a 4-track cassette, made 500 vinyls of and started selling them around London, and we've just taken it on from there. So I'll leave it, my intro at that for the moment.
Okay, so let's follow the direction we can see here. So JJ, please, could you introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm JJ. I am the senior editor, one of the senior editors at Bandcamp Daily, which is Bandcamp's music magazine. I have been a music writer for some time. This very loud and annoying orange man is Cypress. He loves to be on every Zoom. He's got lots of thoughts about the music industry. I am also in a band called Daddy's Boy.
Okay, Violet, hello.
Hi, I am Inês Coutinho. My artist name is Violet, which I make music under, and I also run 3 labels, Naive, Naivety, and Angel. I'm part of a community radio station and a community venue for cultural events. So yeah, basically I think that's it.
Okay.
And I hail from Lisbon.
Thanks, Violet. Karl?
Hello everyone, my name is Karl. I work with K7 since the end of 2020. My role is logistic and distribution manager, and my responsibilities are to maintain an overview over the physical releases we are handling via our label group and the label service partners we are working with, which includes the pressing, the way from the actual release from the pressing plant to the stores. So everything which is involved along this chain.
Hi everyone, my name is Aitor. I'm doing co-management of the distribution and logistics with Karl at K7. I'm also doing level management. I joined the level management team recently also there. And off K7 I'm also doing music on my own and running a small label as well. Yep.
Okay. I think I have all the basic information I need. So concerning a label and releasing music, let's go a little bit back and let's go with the person who I think has the most experience here, Matt.
Certainly the oldest, anyway.
Okay, so let's try to follow a path. And you mentioned briefly your first release, the thing that sparked everything else. You made music, of course, and one of the classic reasons for someone to start a label is not finding another label interested in your music. I don't know if it was the case. I'm speculating,
kind of,
and then doing it yourself.
Right.
DIY, coming from maybe the punk attitude.
That's right.
Whatever. Being the 80s. I mean.
Yeah, from the late 70s, you know, the punk and new wave thing got going, and there were these records coming out in the UK, and we realised that people were putting them out themselves. And I actually tried to put a record out in, I think it was 1982, and lost a lot of money on it. It was a bit of a disaster, ended up having to throw away most of the copies. But by 1987, I'd met Jonathan Moore in a record shop, which is a great place for meeting people, second-hand record shop, and we decided to put out a record called Say Kids, What Time Is It? And this was done on a 4-track cassette. It was a turntable mix, basically. So it was really, before even the term sampling got going, it was kind of a DJ mix, and it was inspired by these records from New York by two guys called Double D and Steinsky, who are two smart Jewish stoners from New York who'd fell in love with hip-hop and decided they wanted to do something with it, cutting up stuff and putting a hip-hop mix party on plastic. There was also the influence of people like Grandmaster Flash, who was able with 3 turntables to do kind of live hip-hop beat collages and put that out as a record as well. The thing about these records was, though, they were completely illegal because they were just bits of other people's records kind of stuck together. And we knew that these American records had not really been able to be officially released. And so we thought, well, if we want to do something like this, the only way for us to do it is to do it ourselves. So that's what we did. We made the track on a pause button edited 4-track cassette, just a montage of all these hip-hop clips and then other bits of funk records and spoken word and kids records mixed over the top. And we took it to a place in East London, and we said, the guy said, what's the record number? We said, we'll call it Dodgy 1. Dodgy is a UK word meaning something's a bit suspect, you know. He said, no, don't call it that. That might get you a problem at the pressing plant. So we settled on DG01. We went to a pressing plant in West London. This was something you could do then. And gave them the lacquer, the acetate rather, which this guy had cut for us. And we came back a week later thinking we might get arrested, actually. We gave false names because we were literally worried that, well, there was a lot of bootlegs around at the moment, but we didn't think what we were doing was a bootleg. It wasn't like we were just copying the Michael Jackson album. We were doing something that we thought was valid, but we knew it was a bit dodgy. So then we went back with our false names and gave them £500 and ended up with 500 records. And then John started selling them from directly out of the second-hand record shop, Reckless Records in Soho. And we in that time, am I going on too much? Is this okay? That time, UK black music and dance music and hip-hop was just not taken very seriously in the UK. We liked our American imports, which are a bit more exclusive and a bit more expensive and quite hard to get. And so we pretended that our record was from America. We kind of disguised it as an American record. And a UK 12-inch used to sell for £2, €2, right? An import would sell for £5. But we paid more than that for some certain exclusive records, like these mixed records, a Double D and Sky. So John said, yeah, it's 50. If you want a copy, it's £15. And we've only got a few of them. It's from this guy, DJ Cold Cut in America. And it's 15 quid. And we sold them all because people realized, or they got it, that they were getting something special, something underground, something a bit outlaw, something difficult to get. And that was the start of Cold Cut.
So all the promotion was through the record store?
Well, yeah, there was no promotion.
You were nobodies.
No, we were nobodies. There was no press, nothing. And we certainly had no ideas of sort of promoting the record. But you know what? It promoted itself. So we didn't have to do anything. And then, you know, the odd music magazine started trying to come in and interview John and say, well, where's this come from? And he just totally lied about it and said, well, it's this guy in the States, DJ Cold Cut, you know. And so we started, there was a buzz about it, but we didn't actually do anything. You know, that was maybe the secret of it.
Okay, so at the time, there were no plans to make a label out of it?
No, it was just...
Did you think it was a one-off, or did you plan something else?
No, at that stage, it was just like, let's just do this. Let's just make a record, right? And then, yeah, when it took off, you know, we got some money from it. It was like, okay, well now we can afford to go and make another record, and maybe you know, that we'll build on the success. But at the beginning, it was just an idea, just to do something that we were excited about.
Okay, thanks. You had a strong connection with the hip hop scene in the beginning. I can remember at least another person present that was early in her career, Inês, very much connected to the hip-hop scene, to the local Lisbon hip-hop scene, and she, I believe, still is part of a duo called Amor, which means simply love. And you also released at least a couple of CDs, as far as I can remember, maybe more that I don't know of.
Yeah, I copied them at your shop.
Yeah, I remember at least one, spray painted.
Yeah.
Tell me about the process of wanting to release something out of your creativity, and how easy was that, or how complicated was that, in terms of production of the music as well as the physical production of the object and the distribution.
We were very young. I was 21, and my cousin Maria, who does Amor with me, she was 17. So it was kind of like a fun game. We were too inexperienced and too rough around the edges to be taken seriously by any labels, really. Like it just wouldn't make sense. But we still wanted to put music out, because I guess part of like us musicians that perform live, you know, part of us always wants to share something, and we wanted to share that. And at the time, the most obvious format would be the CD, which was the format we grew up with, both as listeners and also as DJs, because we started playing as DJs as well as rapping in the group. So we kind of just took a chance. We had no idea what we were doing, and there was no strategy for distributing them. It was kind of a word of mouth thing. It was extremely underground back then, and we, as you know, copied the CDs at your shop, and then we did something kind of outlandish, which was painting the top of the CDs with spray can and doing a stencil over it with our name, which kind of sort of ruined some of the CDs because they wouldn't play properly. And then we did a very, very rudimental design and sort of distributed it in, I think, mainly in one or two shops in Lisbon, and then word of mouth. It was sort of like playing labels, really. Not until 10 years later would I release something more seriously you know, in my own terms. Although I started releasing music, my own music in 2012 in other independent labels, but I only started mine in 2006. So that was literally 10 years later. 16, sorry.
Okay, so that was naive.
Yeah,
I mean
that
it as
was
a
naive.
pun. I mean it as a pun.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah. Also.
Okay, let's move on a bit. We'll get back to you later on. JJ, you say you shout in a band called Daddy's Boy. Speaking of earlier we were kind of in passing mentioning the punk scene, the punk attitude, new wave, the early days, the DIY culture. Do you have any releases? I'm doing the part of someone who doesn't know much about what you do, and I actually don't know much about what you do. So I might as well acknowledge it and be informed. Do you have your own releases? Do you have your own label? How are you in a punk band these days? I mean, the message is obviously needed, a political, social, activist message connected to the punk scene, ideally, is always needed. How do you release your music?
Yeah.
Is
So
it,
oh, sorry.
Sorry, just to end the question. Was it before or after you joined Bandcamp as a staff member?
Oh, I have been in bands since I was very young. My parents are musicians, and I grew up in the punk scene, punk and hardcore scene of Washington, D.C. in the 1990s. A very good time and a very good place to be a teenager that was very angry and had access through their parents to that scene. My dad in the 80s did sound around town for and also ran an amp repair shop out of our basement. So he was plugged into that whole world, even though he was just, an old hippie and wasn't super up on punk stuff. But when I started wanting to go to shows when I was 10, 11 years old, he was like, I'll take you, because he knew where to go to find the flyers and where to go to find the venues.
How many times did you see Fugazi live?
I did many times.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Very, very lucky to be able to do that. And I was part of Riot Girl in the early days and Positive Force in the early 90s and then mid 90s as well. So all of that is very foundational to me. I grew up writing zines. That's how I became a music writer. And I have been in bands since I was a teenager. And I'm 44 years old and I'm still yelling in a hardcore band, which I don't know what that says about me, but there's something that's really vital about it. But yeah, I've been in bands forever. For a while, in the late 90s, a friend of mine and I tried to do our own little label. We put out 2 or 3 records, and just the bands that we kept working with just kept breaking up before we would put out the records. We were just I think that this label is maybe a little cursed. And
Okay, so
also we had no money, so you know.
It was essentially a live circuit.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so how did you come to releasing records? I mean, physical records. Have you released them?
Yeah, physical records. And yeah, we just called, we would just call up the pressing plant and do an order. You'd record in the basement and you'd get sound files that were kind of good enough and send them off to the pressing plant, and we'd, hand screen the covers and everything. So I have been putting out my own records for a long time. The last few bands I've been in, Population, which I was in from 2009 to 2013, Split Feet, which I was in from 2011 to 2016 or so, and this current band, which has been around for a few years. we have all worked with small DIY labels on all of that stuff. Our current record is on Drunken Sailor out of the UK, and it's been lovely working with them. They're great.
Okay, thanks. And now to Aitor, you also have a label. You produce music, you DJ, you have records released of your music through your label, but you also work for, let's say, a big company, which it is nowadays, K7. Did you start your own label before working in K7? Did you dream about a label and that was why you came to work for K7? Did you do your label because you were in K7? How do you separate the two things?
The label came before K7. I'm originally from Valencia, and I moved to Barcelona when I was, I think, 24 years old. I was studying then music production and sound engineering, so I was with some friends, and at that moment I started to do music as well. I'm not a musician, I'm not a skilled musician, so my background was rather DJing. But at some point I was really seduced by the idea of doing my own music with first just a laptop, and let's see how it goes. So I just bought like a drum machine and a basic synthesizer, and with Ableton I just did few songs, and I sent to some friends and they like it, and I was like, yeah, so now I guess it's time to just send to labels that maybe will be interested. But then they came up with the idea to just found a label ourselves. So it was like, yeah, something exciting. So there, yeah, we found the label, Band in Vegas. And then when I finished my studies, I wanted to move somewhere. I was a bit, I don't know. I mean, I still love Barcelona, of course, but I kind of wanted to just, Berlin was one of my favorite places that I was going every now and then. So then is when I moved to Berlin and I started the internship at K7. Mm-hmm. In the digital department, and after that I got a position with the physical distribution one that I'm still doing now. Okay. So then I'm basically combining, like, I'm working at K7, like it's my main work, let's say, and then on the side I'm just doing music that I'm releasing through the label, and also releasing other labels like Lapsus from Barcelona, for example. So I keep it this as just side job that is my passion and is what actually, I really like, let's say. But yeah, it's totally separate. It's just small label that we're doing like a couple of releases or one per year, just friends that I like what they're doing, or connection that I have through friends, or meeting people that I stumbled across in Berlin, or you meet in this scene. And yeah, this is more or less how is it going now.
And do you find, if you didn't have, like, let's call it a proper job, would it be possible to maintain a small label like yours still is, at least? Would you be able to invest in physical releases? Would you be able, to take some money out of it to reinvest in future releases? Do you think you could dedicate yourself to a small label if you didn't have a job on the side with a decent pay?
No.
Okay. I mentioned this because I always remember something a very well-known Portuguese musician said once. He was a very famous guitar player. He played a traditional Portuguese guitar, simply called Portuguese guitar. Sorry. His name was Karl, and he was a civil servant. And he said he would never dream of leaving his job because he loves music. He loved music so much he could never live off of music. He could never compromise his creativity, his passion by working specifically in music. So there you go. That was more or less the reason I asked. In this world of mounting costs, I know because I co-founded it and co-run two very different labels. We deal with costs, with rising prices. And we can not dream at this stage of dedicating ourselves fully to the labels. In terms of costs, Karl, you are more connected to the physical aspect of releasing, distributing. I mean, not actually releasing. As far as I know, you're not involved in any label in the part of release planning.
Exactly.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. But you know a lot about the whole process after the release is put in place and manufactured. I mean, you also take part in the manufacturing process, or your job starts when the record arrives fully formed?
Exactly. My job usually starts when the order confirmation from the pressing plant comes in, which is the starting point for us as a physical distribution to work with the product actually. From there on, we take on the process by getting in the initial orders from the big territories we are working with after the release announcement via our sales department. So by then we already know is the estimate of the initial pressing going to be enough, for maybe we already know that we need to get a repress going or increase the pressing numbers we initially requested.
Do you advise labels on that? On the quantity, the labels you work with, you distribute, do you advise them in terms of how many copies they should press?
I do not. We do as K7, but this is via the label management department. Also, the sales department is involved in that. And we usually take over pressings from 300 copies to 10,000. This is the sort of pressing range we are dealing with, and everything in between.
Okay, I'd be curious to know briefly what differentiates a release of 300 and a release of 10,000. Like when the label plans, I will release, or we will release 300, or we will release 10,000.
Yeah.
Because 300 nowadays is sort of 300, 500 is sort of the standard quantity. It's not even considered limited anymore, I would say.
Sure.
Even 10,000 in the 90s was a limited edition, I think. Matt can go into that later, but
I mean, to be fair,
for
if
the
we
world,
press 10,000 units, it won't be a new release, probably. It will be a release which we will be sure about that it's constantly selling since years, so it makes sense to increase the numbers up front in order to get the manufacturing price as low as possible.
Okay.
As the more you press, the cheaper it gets. And if
Kruder
you...
and Dorfmeister?
Something like this,
Okay.
maybe. Yeah, Kruder and Dorfmeister is definitely something. And smaller runs are pressed by smaller labels, you know, like labels which maybe have 2 to 3 releases per year, which also are a bit more DJ focused, often like 12-inch runs and stuff like this. And if it comes to 1 LP, 2 LP format, we are rather talking about 500 to 1,000 as an initial order. And depending then on the artist's background, on previous sales we might have gained, we might raise the initial order to 2,000, 3,000. This is usually 3,000 is usually the highest amount we go as an initial order to start with. From there we take the orders, and then we can see and always take it further.
Okay, so a big number of records also has behind it a financial concern. I mean, if you press more copies, each copy costs less.
Exactly.
So that makes sense.
You've got to know that you're going to sell them.
Yeah.
I remember when I said I made our first record, and I went along. I was only 21 then, right? So I went along to the pressing, the company that did it, I said, I just want to get 500 records done. And the guy said, well, that's going to cost you this amount. But if you do 1,000, you know, it's much, much cheaper. So I said, oh, okay, I'll do 1,000. Well, I ended up throwing most of them away. You know what I mean? So, and that, then you just basically wipe out all your profit. You might go, in fact, you go into a loss. Whereas if you'd just done the 500, you might have been able to sell all those. So it's judging that and getting it right is pretty tricky, right?
Speaking, well, but then there's other considerations. As a label grows, you have to pay the artists. I mean, the revenue from the records, if you only press 300, the artist gets very little. If you press 1,000, I mean, assuming you can sell 1,000 or 2,000 or more, the artist gets a little bit more as well.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, you know, for us, releases on vinyl, why sexy and hip, and not where we earn our money, you know? It may be so for other labels, I don't know. I mean, I'd ask the K7 guys, you know, if you do a new release by a new artist, right, and you do a vinyl release, what actual percentage of revenue that you get from that release will come from a vinyl release, and how much will come from streaming? You know, for example, streaming and downloads. I can tell you that for Ninja Tune, just jumping forward a bit, you know, I think vinyl is probably about 15%, maybe only 10 of our revenue. CDs are down at the moment, probably another 5. Streaming's probably about 50-60% with downloads, and then sync, where we license music for example, adverts, films, TV. That's called sync. That's about another 30%. So actually, sorry, it's not very hip, but the reality is that streaming is where we earn our money. So it's not just about whether you're going to get your money back on 300 copies, right? The 300 copies might get you a review, they get you some hip DJ to play your stuff, but they're not actually going to make you any money.
Yeah. I've recently heard from a Warner Music representative in Portugal, pretty much the same concerning vinyl sales versus digital sales. And he actually told me that even internationally, some major labels still make vinyl records because the artists want to make vinyl records.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Because they are still connected to the format and they still think it gives them credibility. But the labels, like, they don't seem, the major labels, they don't really seem to care about that anymore. So it's a perspective.
Yeah.
It's a perspective. JJ, the records you guys released, did you make any money out of them? Did you expect to? Was it a plan? Didn't you care? Where did the money come from? Etc. Tell me about your own experiences.
I have never expected to make money on a release. I don't do it for that reason.
Okay.
I have always had a day job of some kind, and that is my main income. Music is purely a labor of love for me, and that's where it comes from. We have, you know, made enough money as a band to, you know, finance the next record, or to, sorry, the feedback is like really, because I can hear myself. But thank you, I appreciate it. It's distracting, but yeah, I've never expected to make money from it. I've always tried to make like the money I need to live from something else. And we've made enough money as a band to keep going, to finance the next record, or to be able to hop in our cars and go on tour. You know, like a few $1,000s. We operate very economically, and yeah, just expect to be able to continue doing what we love to do, and that's all.
That sense. All the records you guys released were self-financed and independent of outside, contributions like a label financing a release. So you did everything yourselves.
No. Our current band works with a small label, and they financed it for us. But everything else we do ourselves.
I believe I'm not mistaken. You started Naive after a period when you lived in London.
Yes.
Am I correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Around 2017, maybe 16.
16, 17, yes.
Okay. I'm interested in knowing what would be the case if you had never been in London for that period. Do you think conditions to start a label, motivation, would be similar? Would you have started the label anyway? What do you think the London experience and all its inspiration and, direct contact with a different reality? For us that don't live in London and are not from the UK, it has always been kind of a dream to contact with such a vibrant scene or scenes. So speaking also for myself, every time I came from London or any other center of music I respected, I always came with a buzz. So tell me the difference between Portugal and London.
It was very real for me in London, although I did want to start a label when I was still in Portugal. Around 2013, I was playing with the idea of starting this label called Peixinho, which translates it as little fish. It made no sense, but I already, had my A&R. I already had my first release in mind. It was this Scottish producer, and then Photons from Lisbon on a split. So I had these ideas, but I really didn't at all have the financial capacity or the contacts for proper distribution or a P&D deal. So it kind of stayed a dream until I went to London. And in London, the special thing, I guess, that I took from London, I call it the software that I downloaded there, was like this idea that you should just go for things, even if they, aren't perfect or go wrong, you should try. Whereas I feel like the mentality in Portugal is a bit more maybe perfectionist. Let's do it when we're ready. It's a bit more structured, I guess, and in the UK, I guess maybe with its economic history and industrial boom and neoliberal, politicians, I don't know, but it was a place of doers, whereas in Portugal it felt more like a place of thinkers and feelers. So it was good to have sort of one foot in each culture, and obviously, like in concrete terms, London is where I met the people who distributed and Naive for the first 5 years of its existence. Lobster Theremin. They used to be a label, and then they branched out into being a distributor for some years. And I met the person running it, as well as some of the persons helping run it when I was living in London. And I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have met those people if I wasn't in London, because it was a matter of going to the same parties, going to Dance Tunnel, Corsica Studios, like meeting these people, talking about sort of your hopes and dreams, and realizing that it's all doable. And one day I felt really confident about 3 tracks I had. And I just, because I already knew these people in this distributor, and I know they did pressing and distributing deals, which would be, instrumental for me, because I really had no disposable income in London either. That didn't make me better off financially than Lisbon. So I was confident in these tracks, and to this day, I'm surprised they believed in them, And they did, and we put it out, and it was one of the most successful records on the label to date. So it also gave a really good sort of, it set the tone really well for the label, which was really lucky. And then yeah, by the time I think that by the time this first record was out, I was already living in Lisbon. I know this because I asked Blade to be the remixer, and I only met Blade when I was already back in Lisbon in 2016. So it was kind of like transitioning from, you know, bringing these ideas that I learned in London and kind of like trying to put them into practice here, you know, wherever I was living, in this case, Lisbon, which is a city I love and plan to stay living in. But yeah, it was kind of, it was stars aligned in one way because of the people I met there and because I knew people in distributors. And I think after, you know, trying and failing many times with my own music, I for the first time had 3 solid tracks to put on a label, and something in me, the A&R, the unborn A&R in me kind of was awakened, and I, for the first time, kind of believed in the stuff I was putting out. And then it rapidly developed into releasing my friends and new artists that would send me demos that would get me really excited, or people I was doing workshops with because I was teaching, you know, mostly girls how to produce on Ableton Live, and I was getting really nice results. So that was also a really fun experience, and very much in the DIY spirit of like people that grew with me, other than like going and picking, you know, artists that people already know. So that was kind of the ethos of Naive, which kind of made it harder in terms of sales, not gonna lie, and in terms of, you know, having our vinyl secured for each release. Basically, the best thing that happened to us, I think, was breaking even. And then the repress of my first record, and the Eris Drew and Octo Octo record, which was the biggest record on the label, and they made a bit more than usual. They made around 500 units. Naive normally only makes 300. But yes, I think London was instrumental in, you know, making me believe everything was possible. Not in, no, it didn't help me like in a material way. It was more like the software. Although I did meet people there that did give me their hand and were generous to me. So a bit of both, I guess.
Okay, going back to the practical side, you mentioned those pressing and distribution deals, usually called P&D. Do you feel in any way it is limiting to the existence, to the continuated existence of a label? Because to be brief, and I think I'm not wrong, the production aspects and also the most of the revenue, at least, is in the hands of the distribution company. You get to release your music, your records, but you don't really get much out of it in terms of earnings.
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable with that? Do you feel the message you're passing with the music, the enabling you are, the fact you are enabling other people from your community to make music and to expose themselves artistically, do you feel that's more important than controlling the financial aspect, being independent financially from the distribution company?
I guess it's a mixed feeling because we did digital from the get-go, and that also went really well. So we were, you know, paying our artists from the get-go. Basically, we had Bandcamp was huge and still is for Naive, and our digital distributors, Sequence, who are a body separated to Lobster Theramine, are really good at putting the releases out and getting deals with, you know, online shops, like getting banners in exchange for exclusivity on some, you know, good online shops. So I had this, you know, financial pillow of the digital side, and then I could kind of just experiment and have fun with the vinyl with no financial expectations. And I think the artists and me and the DJs that would buy the vinyl would just be happy that it existed in that format, because there was really no other way for me to do it, because I never had the liquidity, I didn't have that cash available to invest, basically. So it was either that or nothing. And I do nothing with my other two labels, which are only digital. But with Naive, I really try to focus on, DJ centric music that DJs will want to collect. So I save all the dance floor belters, or my version of them, for Naive. And then I can do other stuff on my other digital labels where I don't run so many risks, because obviously, you want to at least break even with the vinyl, as much as the digital might compensate, and it does if you lose money. um, you kind of want to think it makes sense to put all these slabs of plastic out in the world. And to me it does, because loads of my favorite DJs only play vinyl, and I wanted them to play the records on my label. So it was that was the motivation as well. It was never a financial thing.
Okay, thanks,
Yeah.
Inês. Speaking of distribution, Karl and Aitor, you work for a label that's also a distribution company. Although you were not there from the beginning, are you able to tell us how does a label go from being a label to being a distribution company? Why at some point does it make sense for a label to become more than a label, to work with other maybe similar-minded labels and help them bring out their product into the world in a more, I would say, bring them more exposure, bring more exposure to independent labels, such as K7 once was, and still is, I think. Do you have any idea of how the process went from being a label to distributing records?
I mean, we know when K7 started to do the label services, but I mean, we were not there to see the transition, but it started as a music video production before was the DJ Kicks and the X-Mix series.
The X-Mix video series.
Yeah,
very much connected to the techno and house and rave scene happening in the early 90s, right?
Yeah, but before that was in the 85 was already set up as Studio K7, and was for music videos, like for, I mean, at that moment was Nick Cave living in Berlin, so like concerts. Yeah, exactly. Like so they started like this, developed to the X-Mix, keeping the visual part with the mixes from all these techno or even trip hop artists that were in that moment, delivering the DJ kicks also at the same time, more or less. And then towards the 2000s, when there was this affiliation of the labels like Strat, that is more based reissues, soul, jazz, and world music. Ours, which is more connected to club music. Exactly. And few labels like 7K, Neoclassical, more recently in 2017. So it was like on the label group itself, and then also at I think around 2017 or something like that, also grew up to the label services. The reason, I guess, is just like to connect with the labels that have something in common, and just provide these services as a distributor that was already set up.
Okay, so all those labels remain independent in terms of their decision making. Like the artists they choose, the reissues they choose, everything remains independent.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just doing this for 6 months already, the label management team. But exactly, I mean, they just propose what they want to release. But we are there to also like give advice. Like when you were asking before, like how many they should press. Normally they have it quite a clear idea, but sometimes it's like we don't know, because it seems like quite a big project for us. We're not sure if this will be enough or we should go for. So then this is when it comes like the advice, like from us, from also the sales manager, and seeing obviously the history of the artist, how was the previous releases, how if there's plans of future projects after the release, like tour, music videos, or remixes album. So everything obviously drives into the decision of the final edition, the quantity. But yeah, in terms of the releases, they are just bringing their planning, and we are just developing the project, like the yeah.
And what about the K7 label? How does a release happen with a new artist, for example? I imagine you receive tons of demo tapes. Yeah. I mean, tapes is not the right word anymore, but lots of demos. Do you actively, is the label so big now that you don't need to bother looking out for talent anymore? Talent comes to you? How does it happen? Usually, I mean.
Yeah, it happens this way, actually. It happens naturally, like, or either we are receiving stuff, or we just, someone of the team or the A&R is just suggesting some artists that they meet, like, doesn't need to be someone that is like for to do DJ kicks. Like, we're also doing albums, and most recently, like 12 inches, like just 2 sides, and it's like club ready tracks as well. So yeah, it's just a mixture of both. The DJ kicks decision is mostly like for the A&R team, and it's something that is not actually our department, so I'm not really aware of the process, but yeah.
Okay, back to Matt. Still in the early days, so this will never end. After your first record, there was Ninja Tune. I mean, I don't know if it was exactly after the first record, but it probably, the record and other work you probably did because of the record, remixing jobs, mainly DJing, I don't know. Where did the money come from to start a label? Was it a direct consequence of your earlier work as DJs, producers, remixers?
Not so much from the remixing side. I mean, we did this remix for Eric B and Rakim, and it ended up being a big hit worldwide. But we got 750 euros for that.
And
so
that was that.
That was it, you know. But it did get us on the cover of the NME, which at the time was the Bible of what is cool in music. So that helped propel us. And now I must say, you know, from our first records, though, we made money on all our records, but we got the pricing right on it, and the costs were not so great in those days. You know, the pressing costs were much less, and we were selling them initially just directly, without even a distributor, through John at the shop. And John would take his old Ford Escort van, we put some records in the back, and we'd drive around to some other shops in London, and we'd sell them. So then there would be no distributor cut initially. So we were doing quite good off that, and we started off selling 500 copies, but then we actually got up to like 3,000 copies, which, considering it was just pretty much London, was pretty decent. That was a lot. So then, you know, that provided some funds to actually go out and buy a sampling drum machine and, you know, get a next bit of equipment and so on. But I'll just quickly sketch in about the label and the start of Ninja Tune, because what happens is we put out our first record. It was a white label, so it didn't have any label. Then we was like, okay, let's make our own label. Let's call it Ahead of Our Time. So then we put out some records on that, and they did pretty good. And then we signed with this label, Big Life, and they were like, hey, we've got this young singer we think it'd be good for you to work with, and that was Yaz. Yeah. And then we had some big hits. So suddenly we were in the pop charts, and we had a #1 record with The Only Way Is Up. It was a huge record. So suddenly we were like #1. So that happened sort of in a year, more or less, from just putting out this first sketchy cassette-made first record. So, and then, long story short, we ended up getting pretty shafted by that company, that label that we'd signed to, which was also a label called Big Life. And you know, long story short, we audited them, and the auditor said they owed us 300,000 quid. We never got it. So that didn't earn us any money. We did get some money though, but after that, then they sold us on to another label, And this is all quite relevant in a way, because you've got to watch out when you sign contracts what you're signing up for, because what you can be doing is you can be signing away your rights, and if you don't get it right, you might not get those rights back again. And to this day, some of our rights have gone, and they're owned by Arista BMG, and we're not going to get them back ever, because we didn't have good legal advice, and we fucked up basically. And we're still paying the price. It's quite a horrible thing to have created work and then you just lose the rights to it. And that happens to many people. So we got to this point where we couldn't actually put out our records under the name Cold Cut, because this other company, the major label now we were signed to, was controlling our output. And it got very messy. And it was at that point that we went to Japan on tour with Norman Cook, who became Fatboy Slim a bit later on, and decided to start Ninja Tune as a sort of escape pod to blast off out of this horrible situation that we were in, and become independent again and start using other identities, other names. That's where DJ Food came from. And that was the start of Ninja. And then as that trip hop thing kind of took off with the DJ Food releases, other artists came to the label and said, we'd like you to put our records out as well. I'm sure that's probably how K7 did as well. We weren't necessarily going out looking for other artists. They actually came to us. So that was why we started Ninja Tune, was to get out of a bad contractual situation that we found ourselves in because of our naivety and gullibility.
Okay. You told me before you started a label, but then early on you didn't become that much involved in decision making within the label. Wasn't it your thing ever, or
it was?
You were more
at the
interested
beginning
in production?
Yeah, but no. In the beginning, it was really exciting because it was just totally hands-on, and it was just me and Jonathan and one friend of ours, and my best mate came to help us out for a bit, and that was great. And it was my other best mate from college that did all the initial graphic design for Ninja Tune. So it was kind of a family affair. But then I think this guy phoned up one day and said, I want to work for a small dance label. And he was a friend of a friend. He was actually a friend of a guy who was in my band when I was at college. So all these small bands and so on, it's all part of your network or whatever you grow out of, your culture. And I said, they don't come any dancier or smaller than us, come on down. And that was Peter Quick, and he came down the next day and he never left. And it's him who's run the label. And after that, I met these guys called Rob Pepperell and Miles Visman, and they were art students that were into using computers to make art. And I was really into this idea. I was into taking what we were doing with sound, cutting it up, looping it, sampling it, processing it, electronic music making, and applying that to visuals and electronic arts as well. And I got really kind of seduced by this idea and kind of went off on that. And Pete ended up basically running the label, which it's him who's made such a great success out of the label, really.
Okay, so you didn't take part in the decisions concerning the records after that?
It evolved.
Okay.
It evolved. Initially,
Depending
we were
on the
more
records.
involved, but as it became evident that Pete was really good at doing this, and then we started getting more successful. We started employing more people. There became a staff. I didn't want to be managing loads of staff. I wanted to be doing my creative musical thing and getting on with these ideas. So then Pete more and more took over. I mean, in the old days, I used to write the press releases for Ninja Tune.
Lucky you, there was someone who liked doing that job.
I think many artists could relate to not wanting to do the kind of, as it seemed, boring stuff or the admin stuff or the logistical stuff. I mean, Inês is smiling there, and wanting to have someone that can take on that role. And we found, the first people we found ripped us off. The next person we found was Peter, and he was an honest, super bright, hardworking guy, and that's been a great partnership. And we made the decision early on with Pete to cut him in as an equal partner on everything on the label. After he'd been with us a couple of months, it's like that. This guy's wicked. So that provided, a good agreement and joint motivation structure for him to put all his considerable abilities and energy into the label. I'm very into that idea of cooperative relationships, and Ninja Tune's whole thing, my relationship with Jonathan, is a 50-50 deal. Doesn't matter who made the track. It's cold cut. It's equal splits, John and me. Equal credit. With Pete as well, we formed that relationship. With our artists on the label, we have a 50-50 deal with them. So both parties are equally motivated. We feel we bring a lot to it, the artists bring their music to it. I love cooperation. That's what humanity's skillful, that's our strong suit actually. Gets forgotten about sometimes with capitalist emphasizing always the competition angle of things. No, cooperation is where it's at.
Okay, thanks, Matt. JJ, Matt was telling us about his first record, how it virtually sold out in a store only. No promotion, no real promotion. Working for Bandcamp, being the senior editor of Bandcamp Daily, do you think Bandcamp can be that store for new labels, new artists?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see it all the time. We have access to the stats from the daily articles, so we can see like when people are buying stuff just straight out of the articles. And I know that a lot of our other features also, you know, if you end up on the homepage in New and Notable, or if you end up in any other curated feed that's not official, like if, you know, you're getting other artist recommendations, or you know, fans are buying your record and they can see all of that in the feed. Their friends can see that, and then there's a snowball effect from there. Yeah, it can absolutely be that for folks. And it makes me really happy and excited whenever I see our coverage like lift somebody who wouldn't have gotten covered anywhere else up, and be able to shine that spotlight on folks. I know also, I was talking about this a bit in the masterclass earlier today, but I know because I've talked to them, but I know that venues are booking out of our best of the year, for our best of the year lists. I know that labels have snatched up artists because we have written about them and nobody else would. I know that it's just been a launching pad for an enormous amount of people, not just like from the editorial arm, but like on the, you know, fan recommendation arm of things as well. And that brings me just a lot of joy all the time.
We all know the internet is this huge pool of information and opportunities, but filters are still necessary, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, you know, I don't believe in gatekeeping at all, but I do believe in the power of human curation and human recommendation. And I think that that is what all of the different aspects of Bandcamp are able to do, from the editorial, like I said earlier in the masterclass, like it really is the five of us editors and our 2% editorial design team sitting in a room every Tuesday and talking about records we really like. The music that we're covering isn't music that somebody else is telling us that we need to cover. It's coming like directly from like 7 people that are like really enthusiastic about music, you know, plus our social media manager, so there's 8 people. But yeah, it's like coming genuinely from like 8 people who really love music. And that when you see like on the fan curation side of things as well, like that's also coming out of that genuine love for music and desire to share it with other people. And you only do that when like a piece of music like really speaks to you, right? Like you only do that when you think something is really special, and you're motivated to share it with people. Like it's just something that an algorithm could never do, and that's really just lovely. And the good side of the filtering.
Do you consider Bandcamp as a corporation, or as an independent entity promoting other independent entities? And does it matter if the correct values are implemented?
It is a corporation, and even when it was an independent business, it was a corporation. It's a business that exists to make money, like pretty much everything else in the music industry and the tech industry. But I do believe that the people that work here are invested in independent music in a way that I'm not sure, like I know that people are at labels, but I'm not sure that everybody always is at other platforms. Like people genuinely are really excited about music, love sharing it with one another, and are always like digging for stuff. Yeah, like I think that it is a business, it is a platform, but I also believe in the power of all of the people who work here and how much we love music. And all of us, like, just a lot of us too, run labels, are musicians ourselves. Like that's why we started working here. Like a lot of us have just deep roots in our own musical communities. And so, like, it really informs like how decisions are made over here.
I don't see Inês here, but let's move on a similar topic with K7 and Ninja Tune, both nowadays big names in the independent sector, big labels that I would say maybe back in the day. They are now what used to be a major label in terms of scale, in terms of reach. I asked the same question about values. Does it matter how big you are if you maintain some core values of independence you believe in? Maybe Karl, then back to Matt. Also, in terms of distribution, the same question. No matter how big it becomes, the whole operation, the company, the corporation, if the correct values are implemented, I mean, each one has his or her own idea of what correct is, but I would say correct for a project is maintaining its core initial values, I would say. Not that it couldn't change, but where do you see K7 in terms of maintaining some values that were already in place when it was a smaller company? Do you see any difference? I mean, does it matter? Maybe what I'm asking is irrelevant.
I mean, values always matter, in my opinion. Obviously, clear answer, yes. So
I will. This will go on to eco-friendly solutions, maybe political preoccupations and stuff. I mean, values such as those. Besides independence itself, respecting the artist's independence, smaller labels' independence.
Yeah, I think talking about sustainability and values, I think for many labels we work with, it's important to work with a distribution like us, for instance, as we share the value that sustainability is an important thing, and we have invest a lot of work in this area, and these kind of things I think are of value to a lot of labels, and in general I think it's always important for you as a business partner to share the same point of view on certain things as the values, and therefore I'm a bit unsure how to answer, to be honest, but
like for example,
it's a tricky question, right?
Yeah.
It's very philosophical in a way, I think, even.
Well, let me give my perspective. I bet you can relate to this. So when we started off, it was just John and me, and we could just do exactly what we wanted. Now we employ over 80 people, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things we think about is like, what records are we going to put out that's going to keep those 80 people in their jobs? Because keeping 80 people employed in the music business is a worthwhile and useful thing to do. So it's putting out great music. That's more of a balance, though, than it was in the old days when we didn't have to worry about, you know, how to pay our staff, because there weren't any, right?
Yeah, sure.
But our core DNA is the same. We're strongly independent. We're still an artist-led label. But the way that we operate has changed, and we are a somewhat different organism. We've grown up. Your DNA stays the same, but your cells change and your body changes. This is normal growth and evolution. So it's honest to actually admit that. You know, when we're going to sign an artist, one of the things we look at is, what are their metrics? If they've got records out already, what are their plays on the DSPs? Yeah? Does anyone actually care about them already? Maybe, if no one else cares, why would we care about them? You've got to be showing that you can generate some heat yourself, which is kind of a harsh thing, right? Because, am I right? I hate social media, really. Right? We have a love-hate relationship with it, and, you know, that the likes and so on that you get for your posts, you know, it's horrible, really, isn't it? That we're all sort of competing for this attention, and if you don't get it, you feel that you're not worthwhile. But they do mean something, and they are signals from the network that we actually take notice of. So that figures into the questions, because we can't put out all the music that we'd like. We might think that this is great, but actually there doesn't seem to be an audience for it. So, you know, what are we then, if we're going to put it out, are we going to get egg on our face? Are we going to take a bath on it? It's not going to work out. I'm delighted to hear, JJ, by the way, that the, you know, curatorial and editorial process at Bandcamp is as music lover driven as you describe. I'll take it at face value what you're saying, and that actually you're in a great place to exert some considerable power over new artists getting heard that would otherwise not happen, because everyone else is looking at their fucking metrics, and you actually are in a position where you don't have to do that. And by the way, when I said that a big part of our income is streaming, I think I did mention downloads as well. Bandcamp is an extremely important marketplace for us, and to my mind it sort of represents the whole of the independent sector now, and the DSPs are the majors. That's different to how it was before, when it was the majors and the independents. Those terms aren't really relevant anymore. As you point out, Ninja West and independent is almost as big as a major, as a minor major was in the old days. So things have shifted. But to wrap it up, you know, our core DNA is the same. We're all music heads. We're all passionate about music. We want to continue putting out great music, and we want to continue in our jobs, and we want to make it sustainable so we can continue putting out more great music. And that's a more complicated, nuanced thing than it used to be.
Okay. It's almost 11. I don't know if the organization wants this to go on for much longer. Please tell me if we...
No saying.
Okay, you're there. Okay, so one topic I would like to bring to the table is the cost of a record. As a physical store owner, I'm appalled by the growing costs. I have no pleasure at all selling records for a single LP for more than 30 euros, a 12-inch with 2 tracks for 15 to 20 euros, triples for 70 euros if they come from America. And speaking of America, recently at the store, we were discussing with a relatively well-known techno house producer from Detroit the cost of records. Why did he think American records are so expensive nowadays, so much more expensive? And did it make sense, or didn't it make sense to press them in Europe for American labels and artists? If they are hoping to sell good numbers in Europe, why not press the records in Europe? And he was very cautious and told us something like, but then I wouldn't earn as much, which makes sense. but it doesn't make sense from the point of view of the consumer. I buy records, but I buy less and less new records. I buy more and more used records because it has to do with the music I love and my process, etc. It doesn't matter now. But I buy many, many more used records, warehouse stock, second-hand records, whatever, than actual new records. And that has a few reasons, which I won't go into. But one of them is the cost. Although I can easily pay 30 euros for an old album from the 90s or 80s or 70s, I get a different feeling. I also run 2 labels, so I'm more or less aware of the cost of making a record and the build-up it suffers until reaching the final consumer. Do you agree costs are too high? Is there a way to put a brake on it? Do you think, Karl, you're maybe more involved in those processes?
I surely agree that prices are too high, and especially on the point which you mentioned, that the price which adds up on the actual manufacturing price due to shipping costs, packaging, and all this supply chain is increasing more and more, which causes a decrease in margin for the actual label or distributor. And this is the actual problem everyone is facing, no matter who you ask. Like if you ask a label, a distributor, or a shop, or whoever, also even a client who stands at the cash desk at a record store, everyone is suffering from it. And surely it is difficult to put a price break in, because everyone along the supply chain wants to make their cut, you know, no matter if it's the distributor or the carrier or the warehouse or whoever needs to be paid within all these several steps. So
do you think the chain is too complex? Too many people doing the work that could be done by less links in the chain? Or are all the links really necessary?
I mean,
today an artist can sell directly, but
an artist can sell directly, surely. But I think from a label perspective, once you reached a certain size when it comes to your back catalog and therefore related stock numbers, I think you need to make this decision of, or you need to question yourself, am I really able to manage all this on my own? And I think the answer to this for many labels is just no, which is why they are seeking out for a distribution partner where they can share warehouse costs and where they have an easy way to distribute their record within Europe in an easy way, and like maybe find someone who helps them with their D2C orders as well, so they don't have to do this as well. So at a certain point, I think it can't be avoided to involve that many people along the chain.
D2C, just for those who don't know, means
direct to customer. Exactly. Like, yeah, if you as a customer order something at Bandcamp, you may have the chance that the label directly sits at their flat somewhere and packs it for you, but most likely from a certain size of your label, it will get shipped from a warehouse.
It happens a lot these days compared to maybe like 10 years ago. In the shop, we get many more orders, many more boxes from warehouses and not from the distribution themselves.
Especially for labels, I think it's interesting, the D2C thingy, since Brexit happens and there are a lot of UK-based labels which are just had like huge problems bringing records from the UK to the EU, and therefore after Brexit,
we press our records in France, mate.
That was another topic I would go into.
So this is just something Warehouse Partner will be able to help, and therefore obviously will take a huge headache from you, you know.
Yeah, surely, I know that. One feeling I get in our dealings with major labels, the big ones like Warner, Sony, Universal, is that we go and reorder some of their back catalog, like some classic names, I don't know, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, those kinds of artists. And each time we restock those records, they seem to be more expensive. And I think, but this is back catalog. Are they pressing those records constantly so that the new restock we make reflects growing prices? Or is it dead stock that could easily be going off for older prices? Do you think there is something to be done there? Are you aware of any of that?
How major labels I do it, obviously I can't do it, but I mean we are constantly repressing also older back catalog titles, and I can tell you that it's not in our interest to increase the payback, because if we increase the payback, it does not necessarily mean we just do it to make more money, so we make a bigger margin. It's just us being forced to do this step in order to keep the same margin, or not the same margin, but like to gain the same revenue out of it, because everything else got so much more expensive. You know, that maybe you go into a repress and press 5,000 and the stock lasts, I don't know, maybe for a year or half a year, and then afterwards you go to your to your pressing plant and order a rerun, and then by then the paper parts have been increased in price, and then the carrier who is responsible for the delivery to your warehouse has been increased charges, and then your warehouse might have amended the loans for their employees as well, you know, so you're forced to add something on the payback, and therefore can't avoid this step.
So yeah, I guess it's sort of unstoppable for the moment, because everyone needs to reflect the costs they are having. This brings me to a related topic, which is the future of physical products, physical records, tapes, CDs, vinyl. What's the public buying these formats going to be like in a few years? This is maybe a question for anyone who may have an answer. How are young kids attracted to buying records at these prices? They don't have jobs. They don't earn much. So who is buying records? Privileged people with a good income, 30-somethings, 40-somethings, 50-somethings.
I'm not into it. Do you know what I mean? These are luxury goods which come. So I'm going to take a bit of an extreme position. These are the vinyls. New vinyls are luxury goods, extremely expensive and environmentally expensive to produce. Hardly anyone can afford them other than rich people. Why would you do that? You know, the experience of putting on a vinyl record, I'm sorry, it's not so much different from playing it off a DSP, considering the enormous cost that's involved. It's a hipster thing for a few people. Give it up. It's not gonna last. You know, and actually we're seeing, I believe,
we're doomed.
Vinyl demand has peaked actually, and so, you know, in a way that's good news, because it's going to make it easier to get records pressed without these ridiculously long lead times. But you know the band Lamb, Andy Lamb's a friend of mine, and he said, we pressed up 2,000 double vinyls and we took them on tour and we sold them all. I said, you think people play these? He said, no, they put them on their wall.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the reality, and then you don't even need the vinyl inside the sleeve. You might as well just have the sleeve. So yeah,
we get people demanding sealed records. They will actually never listen to physically because they have Spotify or Bandcamp or other platforms.
Yeah, I think we should get off the addiction. Actually,
is any other format an alternative if the physical format is to be maintained? Like, it's much cheaper to produce a CD, much quicker to produce a tape even. It's not as sexy as vinyl. But is there something in there, or is it dead and that's...
My lot were making ambient mix. They're like, yeah, we should do a cassette. I was like, no, it's a hipster format too far. You know? That's going to end up. That's going to end up in landfill. I mean, few enough people have vinyl decks. Who's got a cassette deck here?
Let me tell you, the kids love tapes. They are buying tapes.
Okay, well, you're hipper than me.
It's wild.
I'm not getting a cassette deck. I did my cassette deck bit, you know what I mean? And I don't. It was never a great format anyway. The quality's shit compared to vinyl. CDs were never very sexy in the first place, and they skip, and they're pretty shit as well. And you can't roll a joint on a CD case. So what's the point? You know what I mean?
But in terms of conquering a new audience. Maintaining the ball rolling for physical formats in terms of attracting a younger audience who can actually buy those cheaper formats. Does it make any sense for you? I guess no.
Well, my colleagues won't like me saying this. I think I'll probably better shut up, you know. But you know, personally, I don't think it's going anywhere. And actually, and this is a huge other massive subject which we won't get into now. But you know, the youth really. They don't really care about that because they're watching fucking TikTok and they're watching 30-second videos on there, and that's actually changing the nature of the music business, like real hardcore fast. You know, actually we should be talking about that, you know what I mean?
But I mean, in terms of the industry hoping or trying to attract a younger audience, I think
make better music that's more relevant, that's more exciting, do live shows which are amazing and bring back the excitement of music that way. It's not going to come out of some physical format we haven't thought of yet. Forget it.
Okay. Back to you guys, and maybe you, carbon neutral objective. That's a statement of K7, that's a statement of Ninja Tune, at least official statements accessible to us, regular public. Does it really make sense when you're still producing vinyl records? Is there on the horizon a viable alternative in terms of eco-friendliness to vinyl? Or I believe there are studies being made. I believe Brian Eno is involved in some kind of project for an alternative sort of hybrid format or something that will replace or could replace vinyl and not pollute the environment.
Yeah, there are exploration in terms of bioplastic vinyl. I think it was in cooperation with Ninja Tune, so Matt will be actually able to tell more about this. What we have experienced is we also explored the field of getting greener vinyl, actually, while facing the reality of simple recycled vinyl did not please our expectation in terms of audio quality.
Yeah, sure.
So we did not decide to take this step yet, to press our vinyl on this recycled vinyl which was offered to us, because we don't think the pressing plants are really there yet. They use a certain percentage for every black color already, but the fully recycled version does not really sound as good enough.
Is there any hope of reaching a state where that alternative for non-polluting format, let's call it that, will have good sound quality?
I think yes, like it's already started and it's going into a right direction. So I think, as with most developments, it just takes some more time, and yeah, I hope we are there pretty soon. But until then, you can your decision on the other parts of a vinyl, actually, like the sleeve and the ink which gets used to be printed the cover, or like avoid shrink wrap, use PE sleeves instead, and like the way you package your goods and the way you bring them to the actual warehouse. This is where you can have actual impact on the supply chain. The vinyl pressing itself is, for us, what we experience, it's even hard to get a concrete figure from your pressing plant of how much CO2 was actually caused by pressing a single vinyl, which is just an estimation we got in first place. By now we are able to get exact quotes for the CD manufacturing, and for LPs it's also depending on so many factors, which kind of booklet maybe was involved, which kind of ink was used, and therefore it's just really hard to even get a real figure to work with, and therefore to actually work on it as well, to decrease it, because if you don't really have a real figure to start with, how are you going to tell how your improvements, which you have been implemented, had an effect on it, and how they decreased it? You know, you can always claim you're now using FSC cardboard, but if you don't know how much of an impact it has for your CO2 footprint, you're not really able to track it, right?
Yeah, so basically we should all just do the best we can and not set too high
basically,
of
yes.
a goal.
I think it's also depending a lot on political decisions, you know. As long as there is no CO2 tax by law for companies who manufacture, no matter what they manufacture, if it may be vinyl or sneaker or fashion, whatever. If there is no such threat for a company, I don't think will hardly start working on it, you know.
Yeah, they just keep looking after profit, which is the nature of a company.
Exactly, because our experience, as I'm in touch with the pressing plants we are working with, is that we are the ones who are actively sending those follow-ups in terms of like getting actual figures about those CO2 footprints.
We should maybe join forces on that, because we're doing the same thing. You know, so we must, between us, are quite big customers.
Yeah,
definitely.
Sure. Yeah, we Ninja take it pretty seriously. We're constantly trying to improve our practice on all physical manufacturing process aspects. So that would be, like you say, the cases. We moved away from the plastic CD cases quite a long time ago. You know, even things like the inks are important as well. We're stopping, I think, the shrink wrapping, or we're going to use kind of biodegradable shrink wrapping. These things are all important, and there are improvements to be made. And the vinyl, you know, trying to get green vinyl, I'm not sure how possible it is. We'll eventually, you know, let's make from 100% recycled plastic, right? I don't even remember early Trax records, which was the Chicago house label in the old days. They were pressed on JJ's on recycled vinyl was recycled KTEL LPs, right, which were these shitty pop compilations. So, and they always had this terrible, really terrible quality, but it was sort of part of the sound, but it was a bit shit, really. But you know, we can have better vinyl. Yes, I guess we can, and we actively are researching that and trying to use our little bit of push that we've got to push that forward.
Okay, we're speaking about physical formats, and I will try not to make this much longer because it's not early. But even the digital only format, is it that eco-friendly? Do you have any thoughts about this topic, JJ? I mean, you need huge servers. I mean, Bandcamp, for example, it's growing and growing. I don't know if there's a way to know how many labels and artists are currently registered at Bandcamp, but I'm sure it's growing and growing. you need gadgets. That become obsolete in a couple of years. You have to change your cell phone, change your computer, throw it away. Is it that much more sustainable? This is not a criticism. It's a question.
No, totally.
What do you think
I
about
know it's something that the company is working on, and has been for a long time. I know that they moved everything off of physical servers like a long time ago, and it is now in, I believe, the Google Cloud. Don't quote me on that. I'm not on the technical side of things, so I cannot tell you if that's 100% true, but that is the last update I remember hearing. So I know that they're definitely trying to make things carbon neutral, and to do carbon offsets where that's possible, and to move things to like off of physical servers whenever possible. But again, it does take an enormous amount of energy, and that's something that just in general in the internet, as the internet moves forward, we'll have to think about all of that in terms of the sustainability and the ecological impact of using all of this concentrated energy to power these enormous networks, and where is that energy coming from? That also will involve political decisions that are much bigger than individual corporations, though there is, obviously like a good deal that individual corporations can do. But we live I live in the U.S., which is an incredibly hostile place for environmental law and political decisions around environmental impact. So a lot of that also has to do with our federal government and state governments, and their energy regulations. So it's a big question, for sure.
Okay, maybe one.
Say something's out
Yeah.
of your hands, though. You have to know. Or you have to try and do your best practice to find out, right? So we are lobbying our server companies to get the questions from them about where your energy is coming from. And it's very difficult to get any answers from them, but we're keeping on pushing them. Tim Cook, who's the boss of Apple, I consider a pretty good bloke, and they're probably the least worst of the big companies. A bunch of people were complaining that Apple were spending money on building solar energy farms to power their thing. And Tim Cook came out and said to the shareholders, if you don't like it, just sell your shares and fuck off. That's actually leadership. Do you know what I mean? I think, in fact, they are probably putting considerable effort into trying to solve that problem. And I believe Google are also, they get it. And I think there's a cost to everything that we do. There's a cost to this conversation we're having now, right? Everyone in this room we're incurring costs to the planet. We've got to think about what they are and try and balance them up in some way, and ideally be providing a net benefit to the planet. But it's very hard to audit across one's whole life to actually do that. But it's a good thing to be aware of. And on balance, I'm pretty sure that buying a track from Bandcamp and downloading, or even streaming a track from Apple Music, is environmentally considerably less expensive than buying a vinyl. Sorry, but I think it's the lesser of the evils, ecologically speaking. Okay, maybe one final open question that has to do with the pandemic. The obvious question: is there a pre-pandemic and post-pandemic world in terms of releasing music? Aitor, or do you have any views on that? Do you notice any significant differences as an artist, as a label manager, and as a worker for a bigger company that releases and distributes music? In terms of costs, feeling, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. When it comes to my role at K7, we experience a big increase in sales on the D2C, like direct to customer, as shops were mostly closed. Distributors were hardly working, like due to sick leaves. So the consume were more towards this direct channel. But then now after the pandemic, it came kind of back to the same, but with the increase in prices due to the big demand, material cost. So yeah, the situation is like the peak of the vinyl. I think it was just climbing towards that point, and now that we are back on track, let's say, we are just there, and there's no way to just put it down with leads to these problems that we were talking about, like who can afford now, you can spend as much as you were spending maybe monthly on vinyls before, right?
Do you see any positive changes in the process of releasing music, distributing music, or is it all negative? Does it all come down to costs? And is there anything different apart from the costs?
No, not really.
That's
I think the way is also consuming music. No, I mean the pandemic was like everything was shut down. It was more about something that you can contemplate at home and like maybe I don't know, less dancey in a way. And now it was like at least my feeling was like the tempos were slowing down of the music as well, and like when everything will open up again, it's just like it's consuming more like fast music, like more club, like people is more like okay, let's go back to this. But I think it was in a way a strange moment, but at least as much as I can tell, I was recording an album with a friend actually during the pandemic, because it was like there's nothing to do, so we were locking the weekends to the studio and just having some friends around collaborating, and there was like for our sanity we had to do it, I guess, at that moment. So I don't think it's there's no I mean there's a negative impact of the cost, but I think we all learn during this process, and the moment that we are now, it feels like a bit uncertain, especially with the physical format. But I don't know, like if you go back like 15 years ago or something, it was also like the vinyl was not something that it was kind of slowed down pretty much, and then it went back again, like I guess like the trend, or that we were talking selling turntables in supermarkets and stuff like this.
JJ, Aitor was speaking about sanity, making music for sanity's sake. Did you notice a dramatic increase in the number of artists and labels registering and uploading new music to Bandcamp during the pandemic?
Oh, absolutely.
Was it dramatic? I mean, worth mentioning?
Yeah, no, it was dramatic. And just people were just stuck in their homes or in their communities, and we're just making music to combat that. And we definitely noticed like a ton of uploads. And, one of the reasons, obviously, like Bandcamp Friday exists because artists were not out there touring, making money. And this was a way to help support them. I will say that like we don't entirely live in a post-pandemic world, and I have a chronic illness, and it has drastically cut down like the amount of performing that I can do, the amount of the amount of shows that I can attend. I mean, that used to be my entire social world. And I have had to really adjust how I do that, because we have been so completely abandoned in the U.S. As disabled people, under COVID, and things are still happening. People are still getting sick, and in our country, there is a great there's a great financial cost to that as well. So that has impacted still a lot of artists I know who are touring, and it has impacted me personally. And I think the toll of that, like, I don't know if we'll know, like, totally the impact of all of that in right now because it's still happening. But I think that in 10 years' time, I think we'll look back on that and um, there's just been like an immense impact in who can participate in music because of all of this, and that's really heartbreaking um, in a lot of ways.
Thanks for your contribution. Matt, maybe to end this, Brexit and the pandemic, more or less simultaneously, did it change? Did it change your operation? Did it change your operation fundamentally in terms of the practice, the practical side? Of course, I'm probably saying the obvious.
You know, I have said that I'm not so involved in running the label, but I just speak from my personal experience. You know, Ninja Tune, we all got set up with, I got the company onto Apple years ago, and actually they're a lot easier to get set up. So everyone got their laptop, so everyone adapted to working from home pretty well. And actually, people are coming back into the office, but people have adapted to, you know, coming in like 2-3 days a week, and the company's still doing really well. So that's quite a significant change. And you know, why should people sit for an hour on the bloody metro coming into work if they can work from home? Some people like coming into work actually and socialising. That's been one change. We don't think it's going to go back to how it was before. Mm-hmm. I'd be curious to ask JJ actually if, you know, that massive flood of music that happened because of the pandemic of creating music, has that eased off? Because, you know, the stat is like, it used to be 60,000 new tracks a day on Spotify. Now then it was 80,000. Now it's 100,000. I don't think that's actually going down, is it? I'm curious with Bandcamp if you're actually still receiving more music constantly going forward. One thing we did in the pandemic was a young friend of mine told me that he got really bad panic attacks, and that he found that ambient music really helped him with his panic attacks. And as I've also found, ambient music generally actually has been a huge help to my own mental health and stability over the years. Probably many of us can relate to that. You know, that's what music is, a strength. And so we ended up releasing an album of all pure ambient music called At Zero, and we got tracks from different artists given to us. They still get the 50%. We didn't provide any advances, but the idea was it was a compilation of music for mental health benefit. And the late, great Ryuichi Sakamoto was one of the first people to give us a track. And of course, when you're trying to do something like that, having Sakamoto on board makes it a lot more attractive for other people to say, yes, that's how it works. And very welcome surge of excellent new female electronic music talents. People like Juliana Barwick, Helena Huff have also gave us tracks as well. And we ended up with a really great compilation, and all the label side profits from that go to mental health charities. So I'd say that's a positive thing that came out of it. So thank you. Yeah, that's, that worked out pretty good. So yeah, Brexit, I think the least said the better. I've got my German passport, so I'm okay.
Okay. So JJ, has it eased off the amount of music?
Nope, it is a giant fire hose still, for sure. People are still putting out a ton of music, and it is very, very, very hard to keep up with. Like I said earlier in the masterclass, I get probably 500 to 700 emails a day, and that is just from artists emailing, labels emailing, PR emailing, and there's also just like I spend some time combing through the site and just looking at what people are uploading as well. So it's just an enormous amount of music that's pretty incredible. Yeah, I would say it has not eased up at all. And I will say that ambient like is definitely up there. It's definitely a thing. Our our ambient column does really, really well every month, and it seems like there is just never a bottomless well of new releases that are actually like really vital and exciting in that genre. So I think that return to ambient as like a soothing thing for a lot of people opened up sort of like a deep creative vein for a whole lot of people, and that's been really interesting and cool to see.
Okay, so we're maybe getting closer to what one late Portuguese philosopher once said about each one of us being a poet. By poet, meaning a creative person putting something in this world that didn't exist before. So there's a bright future for that, apparently, in terms of creating stuff and being able to put it out there directly to someone that may like it and consume it and get inspired by it. Okay, I don't know if any of you have any final thoughts. This has been long enough. I didn't cover all the topics, but next time. If none of you have any more thoughts, maybe someone has questions for all of you. I don't see Inês for quite a long time now. She probably got cut off. Okay, sorry.
Well, I had a lot of questions for this evening, but now it's already too late. So I'm going to say thank you. Thank you, Matt, because I grew up with Ninja Tunes. Thank you. Thank you, you both, because I grew also with cassette, but we live in the same city, and I'm very glad to share this context with you. Thank you, Zé, that you moderate this conversation very well.
Thanks.
And thank you for doing your hard job to have a store in Portugal, which I understand that I believe it's a struggle. And thank you, JJ. Bandcamp is really a great platform for all artists. And actually, my question would be about social transformation, which you all are taking part of it. And I want to thank you for this. Thank you.
Thanks. Any more questions? Maybe online questions? I don't know. Otherwise?
Well, I have a question in between. I just want to double check. That's for JJ. Oh. No one? Okay. I just want to, before we end, I would like to wrap it up with talking about independence. And I would really like it if you could all give a short statement what being independent means to you, considering you all coming from different sides.
To be fair, I think my own point of view is being independent means to depend on a lot of different stakeholders. You know, you're never really independent because there's so many factors which have an impact on your project that you are never able to do it on your own, really independent, and that's what it means for me, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't say something like Karl mentioned. It's like, I think it's a wide question, like when it comes to the artistic music field, like to what is independent. I think we can debate about this like for a really long time, like what does it mean for everyone, but I think it's just from when I'm trying to do music, it's just I'm trying to music that I'm feeling satisfied with. That is just not obviously you have influences that you cannot avoid that the way what you were listening since you grew up and what the moment now and what you're listening lately. But in the end, it's just music that things that that feels that comes from you, rather than just like just trying to do music to just get something and a hit or just a money maker thing. That can be also achieved, but just coming more naturally from what you feel.
JJ, maybe?
Yeah, to me, just as an artist, like independence means getting to make that art on your own terms, and to be able to do something that you think is authentic to you and that is coming from like a very genuine place and is coming from a place where you like wish to make a connection with other people, and also coming from just like DIY and punk and whatnot. Like independence to me also just means that idea that everybody's a poet, everybody's a creator if they want to be. Everybody has the ability to make music as much as they do to consume music, and that like we don't see ourselves as passive consumers, we see ourselves as active creators of art in the world. So that's the key tentpole of independence for me.
Took the words right out of my mouth, right? Because I was going to quote Thelonious Monk, who says everyone is a genius at being themselves. So for me, being independent means the fact that we all have a voice, and we can use that voice and we can express ourselves. There's also two aspects of critique of the capitalist system we find ourselves in. One is monoculture. Independent spirit is against monoculture, and it's against the commodification of everything, music, art. Turn that into commodity? No, we reject that. We're here for the passion, for the soul of music. So that's what independence means to me.
I just wanted to add something that Marcio Laranjeira was talking about on the masterclass yesterday, that I think it's also matters for to add up to this idea of independency. And what, like, of course this came in the context of thinking about how recorded music was changing throughout the times and throughout the decades. But what we was talking about was transparency. And that, okay, maybe you depend on a lot of factors, but you know what you're getting yourself into. It's not like something you sign off and you don't know what happens, what are the processes. But okay, yeah, of course there are a lot of processes that are maybe more dense or more obscure, but at least you know what you're signing up to and what you're getting into. And that's also a big part of being independent. Instead of just putting everything in the hands of somebody else, you have, I wouldn't say control, but at least you are more aware of what processes you are getting into. And this was, for me, it was a really valuable insight about what we were talking about yesterday concerning being independent or not, or what it means to be independent. No, okay, this is going to be hard, this is going to be easy, this is going to, but I know what I signed up for, and therefore I'm independent. It's just something I thought it was important. So.
Awareness. I mean, I don't know, first independence of will, being able to do what you believe in as real as possible, do it in practice as real as possible in terms of connection to your inner self, inner will. Being able to do that in collaboration is especially special. Feeling that you're collaborating with someone in an independent structure that has many heads, and all heads are independent, and but, I mean, that's really special. Working alone is hard and maybe not that interesting in many ways. It's especially interesting and fulfilling to be able to keep your independence among people who are motivated for a similar goal. I sometimes during my journey connected to giving more exposure to the music I like and believe in, I thought collaboration was maybe, when I was younger, collaboration was maybe not that interesting because people have other views than mine, and I want this to be my way. But then I became very attracted and a firm believer in the idea that you can work independently from each other, but if the goal is similar, you're rowing in the same direction. And that is, for me, that's still very important, and maybe the core of independence in my line of work. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, everyone, and hopefully see you next time. And good luck for your endeavors. Well, it's done. Like the Spanish say, prueba superada. Do you know what it means? Job done.
You steered it in well. Yeah.